It's a random question, but there's a question mark. Will you get on a plane without a pilot? In your generation, would you get?
Would I get on a plane without a pilot? That is a very good question.
So I think, to some degree, I wouldn't say use the word stigma because there's nothing wrong with people wanting to bet themselves. But you're right. You see, it was always university. Don't worry about apprenticeship, go to university. Whereas I do think there's an influence. It's changing now, and it should do. Because I do think the apprenticeship way in gives you more real-time learning opportunities.
AI has been really good previously for, as you say, helping you with the spreadsheets, making tasks simpler, easier, quicker, and more efficient. But what it will do now is start to verge more into the proactive side.
Own your future. And I think it's a very powerful statement. I think, the future's yours. The world's your oyster. If you've got the determination and motivation, you can, there's no limit to where you're going to go.
I believe your generation doesn't drink as much as my generation. But it's just going back to that point from an expectation. What are your expectations of your career at this stage of your generation? What do you want to do? Difficult question, but what would a good career look like when you get to 50 and retire, whatever you do? Hello and welcome to Roadway, the podcast. Now today we're going to talk about generations and the next generations coming through in the industry. We're not focusing on drivers, we're not focusing on mechanics. We're going to look at everything else that makes up the industry as well. So I'm delighted today to be joined by Stephen and Seb, who will introduce themselves in a moment. And over the next 25-30 minutes, we'll be talking about how they came into the industry, why the industry appeals to them, how they see themselves progressing in the industry, and from their perspective, what barriers are there for future generations coming through. So without further ado, Steve and Seb, welcome, and thank you very much for joining us. Seb, if we can go to you first, a little bit about yourself, what you do, how long you've been in the industry, and over to you.
Cool. Thank you, Richard. So I'm Seb. I'm a group sales executive at Automotive Group. I've been with the business now for 2 years, just over 2 years actually, and I'm sixth generation in the family business of a 150-year-old family business, which is really good actually. It's great to see that family businesses, a lot of family businesses about, and it's good that I'm a part of the family business as well to keep it going. I joined the motor trade. I come out of school and I was looking for something to do. University wasn't a thing that I was looking to go into, so I looked for apprenticeships and I found a car sales one for Stellantis and New, and that was started in the parts for a couple of weeks, which I think was a good sort of starting point for the motor trade for me. And then moved into a service advisor role, just seeing in customers and dealing with their cars, which was also good as well. And then completed an apprenticeship with Stellantis and New. That was over sort of 2 years. And then moved from Stellantis and New to the family business, Automotive Group, where I have just completed a runner truck sales apprenticeship, which lasted for around 2 years, which I think I had the graduation last week on Thursday. And it was a great accomplishment, to be honest. And I think in terms of joining the motor trade, I've always been interested in sort of vehicles, cars and trucks and vans and things. And obviously it's been in my family for so long, and I'm enjoying it so far.
Fantastic. Well, we'll certainly come back to apprenticeships. So I want to talk to you about apprenticeships going forward, but well done. It's certainly an achievement that you described. Stephen, a different generation, but a younger generation than me. So we've got a different generation in the room. Just explain a slightly different pathway into the logistics industry.
Yeah, 100%. So yes, Stephen Hards. I came into the industry a good couple of decades ago now. I started off back in tech. Went to school, did my GCSEs, went to college, got a BTEC, and then was all about making money. Wanted to earn the money. I decided, how can I do that in the most effective way? So got straight in, got a job doing first line support, built my way up into then looking after the support for a head office. That company then went into insolvency. So I quickly pivoted across and went to a company called Fenmark, who are a produce business doing their IT. And that's where I really started off on my journey in logistics, where I started to understand how the whole ecosystem worked. And it was amazing, to be honest. You got different variety all the time, and that was really helpful. Then they went through an acquisition, and I went to work for Big World, a company that was owned by Walmart in the States, which then opened up my eyes to the difference between a family-run business and a major conglomerate. And it was all great experience, but for me, I was traveling a lot, doing a lot of mileage, doing a lot of solutions architecture, and I wanted to be more home-based, start a family, which you can't do when you're out on the road. So I started looking for something more local in my hometown of Peterborough. And that's when the job at the RHA came up to be their head of IT, and still staying within the logistics space, but in a very different lens. So really enjoyed that. Been at the RHA for 9 years and gone on a whole journey through IT to operations projects, and now in my current role as head of operations, as I've been doing for the best part of the last 2 years.
Okay, thanks, Stephen. And again, two very different entry levels into the industry. But again, we're not talking about drivers and mechanics, the things that people recognise particularly in the industry, but we're talking about everything else around that, because they're vital roles, in supporting and supplying the industry. So if we describe this industry as logistics and automotive, because in principle that's what it is, probably we'll go to you first, Seb, because you're the one that will remember this better than Stephen and certainly myself. Mm-hmm. So in schools and colleges, when you're at school and college, is this an industry that is promoted? Is this something you're aware of? And if not, if it hadn't been for the family connection, do you think you would have ended up here?
I think it's interesting because you find that apprenticeships come as a second choice, really. University is always the thing that schools push the most. And as I say, apprenticeships are sort of that backup option. And in terms of obviously the motor trade and the logistics sector and haulage and things around that, it's not really spoken about as much. And I think it needs to be more spoken about because there is hundreds of different job roles within, the motor trade and transport and logistics. And I think they could do better in schools, and they need to talk about things more. They need, open days that the schools have. Maybe it's an opportunity for, dealers like ourselves or all ports, or maybe even, different haulage companies to go into these schools and have a chat with them and let them know that there is loads of different job roles out there. And I think this definitely could improve. Definitely.
It's interesting because we'll come back to my generation in a sec. Yeah. But certainly your generation's team. So when you were leaving school, again, same question. So apprenticeships, university, logistics, this industry, was it something you were aware of? Because, whereas Seb, you come from the background to some degree, because you're 150-year connection, well, not your personally, for the industry. But Stephen, you don't come from this industry's background. So what was your perspective?
The industry was never mentioned, to be perfectly honest. Apprenticeships as a whole were very rarely mentioned, mainly around more your physical labour jobs, so your mechanical side of things in some respects, but more woodwork and that sort of handy trades side of things that they were that they really focused on. The only time we ever really, it's quite an interesting one, the only time that transport was ever really mentioned was when we were talking about stocks and shares, and we did a mock assessment for business studies on buying stocks and shares, and you had to go through the old paper at that time. That's the thing you used to open up and have to read all the time. Go through all of that and look at how your shares were moving and everything, and actually invested in a transport business. That was the only way that I actually had any connection with transport at that point in time. Other than that, it was all about your key skills, but they never talked about how that could then bridge into logistics. So we all did IT, we all did food science and those side of things, but no one talked about how that then intrinsically links back to those career pathways of your MPD kitchens and developing products, and then how you can go into the manufacturing side of things and then use your business studies as well to then diversify into becoming your warehouse operators and managers and going through that real career path. So they could do more to link that together and give people a bit more understanding of the pathways that there are into what sectors and into what roles. It was a lot more about the academic side of things, of learning the skill rather than the actual how you're going to apply it and where you're going to apply it.
Okay, so, and again, from, just to add to that, this is quite interesting because certainly when I was at school, I can remember that. Apprenticeship was a lot more defined than certainly the application it is today from your experience, Seven, probably you thought it was you went into a trade if you're doing apprenticeship. So it was you're a chippy, you're a spark, you're a builder. And they had a scheme called the YTS, which was a youth training scheme, which wasn't really apprenticeship. It was just, you didn't get paid very much money for shadowing somebody, and there was no real structure to it from memory. And I've got a good memory. So I think to some degree, I wouldn't say use the word stigma because, there's nothing wrong with people wanting to bet themselves. But you're right, you see, it was always university, don't worry about apprenticeship, go to university. Whereas I do think there's an influence, it's changing now, and it should do, because I do think the apprenticeship way in gives you more real-time learning opportunities, which we'll come on to in a sec. But I still think that the title of it is looked as not as relevant as university, for example, for whatever reason, and that's the wrong way to look at things. So just same question, but we spoke a lot about schools and education systems there. What could the industry do what could the industry have done 4 years ago when you were still at school? 5 years ago, yeah?
5 years ago.
5 years ago when you were still at school. What could the industry have done in addition to what wasn't happening in the education to attract you into it? It's probably an unfair question to ask you because of your background, but what do you think the industry could do more of?
I think they didn't do a lot of open days at my school. They did, a few seminars and things, and people would come in like there was a big hall room that they had, and we've had a few people come in, but they were more corporate companies, bigger companies, different. It was never really surrounding sort of, the motor trade as such or logistics. It was a bit of a grey area. And I think almost the fact that the younger generation may think that it's a dying trade almost, but it's not. It's wrong, because you've got, electric vehicles coming around, telematics. There's all of these new things that are coming, which is part of the future. And it's interesting, really. You'd think that, hopefully it will get a lot better. And it'd be interesting to see how that plays out. My little sister's at school at the minute. And I know that they have got a bit better. They've got more people coming at a younger age as well. So not, a few months before you're going to leave school, they've brought it in closer. So they're starting it early, and they're, branching out a bit more, which is good to see, good to hear as well.
Well, there's a stat, if it's the NEETs, isn't it? Is it not in training or education? There's 1.2 million people that are between the ages of 18 and 25, 24, I'll say, that are not doing anything, which is a challenge to the country, and it's a sign of times. Stephen, same question for you. So what could the industry do, just generally, what could the industry do more to promote itself? Because obviously everybody sees a truck every day, or a coach, or a van, because we do that. I think your point's really relevant, Seb, that they look at it and think, oh, yeah, it's just a big square thing. But actually, when you get inside one, you've got state of the art. I'm doing another podcast later on today, actually, and it's about the move away from reactive safety, which is all about AI and cameras and brigade and the trucks driving themselves, more or less, autonomous vehicles. Stephen, so what could the industry do more of?
Well, I think firstly is just making people aware of those of those opportunities, because you've just named it there. People immediately think these big trucks. They think it's all about being isolated in a truck and driving around. They don't see the opportunities that I managed to actually take advantage of, which was the IT skills. It was the for those that know me know I'm very process driven. So how can I adopt those process driven skills into an industry? And logistics is great if you're process driven, if you're structured, but you can be reactive to situations as well as proactive. Then there's so much you could be doing. Everything. You've got everything from IT to finance. You've got your warehouse operations. You've got your logistics sides. Everybody working on their mappings and route plannings and all those side of things as well. So there is just so much depth to it. So what could people do, and what could we do as an industry more, is really highlight and put a real spotlight on what those opportunities are and how the transferability of skills. So whether that's new people coming to the industry, whether it's people reskilling and coming back into the industry, or actually taking a full pivotal point, moving from one role to another, it's really important for us to show that it's not just about driving. It's about the maintenance of the vehicles, yes, but it's also about all those people that sit behind the operation as well to make sure it operates daily. So it's for me, it's all awareness. It's about the career pathways, and from a school's perspective, what can they do more? You touched on Seb touched on doing the open days, and how that can be such an impactful thing. I remember getting taken to Truckfest, and that gave me insights into it wasn't just moving goods around. There's the military element to it as well. There's also then the emergency services side. So it then just opened up my awareness of what actually logistics was. So I think that things like that can't be understated.
And obviously logistics started with the military. That's where it all comes from and goes to. So no, that's interesting. And again, just come back to the apprenticeships, because I'm not fascinated by this. I think everybody takes in and learns and develops in different ways, I didn't go to university straight away from leaving school. I did other stuff for about 3 or 4 years. Then I went to university. And the only reason I went to university, I've told this story before on the previous podcast. The only reason I went to university was it was the thing to do at the time to get a qualification. So at least you could always fall back on that to have a career. Never used it in my career, and when I left university, I got a job driving a forklift truck, and the rest got me to have a great career in an industry that gives you the opportunity. So from an apprenticeship perspective, what was your thinking at that time, Seb? Why an apprenticeship, not a graduate sort of degree type course? Because clearly, you're a clever guy and you could have done that as a child. Why did you choose the apprenticeship route?
I think what it was, I was hungry to earn money. I was hungry to gain knowledge. I was hungry to get out there, have real work experience. A lot of my current friends at the minute, they're coming out of university. They've got a degree, but they don't have actual work experience. Working with real customers under pressure. They haven't got on paper their actual, work experience. And I think in terms of that, it's difficult for the employers to give, someone a job role, especially if it's quite a experienced job role. You need to start somewhere. And I think I started, in the service department, and I worked sort of my way up to sales. And I think it gave me, a really good start point for an apprenticeship. You're learning, you're earning money, you're getting knowledge, and then you also get a diploma or a certificate out of it. And it also, that's something to fall back on as well. And I think apprenticeships, they're only getting better. There's more of them coming about. With the Renault Trucks one, I'd completed the first Renault Trucks sales apprentice. I was the first Renault Trucks sales apprentice within Renault Trucks. It was the first sales apprenticeship that they've done. And they did it really well. And they're only going to get better.
That's good. I think it's important. I mean, I'm not bashing being a graduate, by the way.
Yeah.
Or doing MBAs, because I did one of those in my career. But I think there's a certain time where you want to go and combined academic with real life, and that's why I never went to university for a while, because I wanted to go out and earn money actually, but also just to do stuff, and I think there's not a right or wrong answer. It's what's best for you. What about yourself, Stephen? Are you steeped in degrees and stuff? Which way did you go?
No, I absolutely not. I'm very much as I say, I came out of school, went to college just to get a BTEC, so I had at least that, like the apprenticeship. It was about getting that certification to say I am competent to move into those roles. I might not have the experience, but I've at least got a competency about myself. So I did a BTEC, I did an accelerated one that should have been a 3-year. I did it in 2 years because I wanted the money. I wanted to earn the money rather than do more learning. And then it was all about on-the-job knowledge, and then attaching myself to good role models as well. That can't go understated. I think what you find, and when you talk about different generations and how you can mold a bit more together, is identifying who those right people are that can support you. Now, they're not always your most favorite people. They're not the people that suddenly put an arm around you and everything else. They may be your worst critics, but and I've had some of them as well. But understanding what you can take from that relationship and what that you can give that person from that relationship as well has been valuable to me throughout my career. And I've very much been an on-the-job learning person, and I've always tried to take extra opportunities where they come up. I mean, I was working in IT, and I'd go in at night into the warehouse to understand the operations, understand the logistics of how it worked. And you just about putting that extra effort in as well when the opportunity arises. It's too easy to say to yourself, "Oh, don't do it. I don't want to bother them," or "I don't want to move into that area, so I don't want to be a disruption to them," or all these things. But actually, people do want to teach, and they want to talk about what they do, and I think that can't be understated as well as to how you can support yourself in your career.
Okay. And last year, or it could have been this year, not the beginning of this year, so we launched, how was it last year? Anyway, we did a report with Women in Transport. We're a substantial organisation that operate obviously in transport, and it was into intergenerational planning. And basically, it was a year-long piece of research, and that was quantitative as well as qualitative. So we spoke to people, we did numbers with the academic part, and basically it said that there's 5 generations in the workplace. Okay, so if we take myself, and has been probably the older of the generations, probably the 4th one, tipping up to the 5th. You're probably the youngest one at the minute, but there's one quite soon quickly coming behind you. So generations every 15 years, yeah. And then there's you're probably on the top edge of the one just above Seb, tipping into the other one, which is why it's a good cross section. But the views and expectations of what people want from working has changed. And basically, the summary of the report, which we'll put the link on at the bottom, says certainly your generation now, Seb, and the one underneath it more so, are looking for a job where they'll probably change jobs every 2 or 3 years. They might move industries every 4 or 5. Certainly my generation was you did a job for life. There was a lot of that. That's going back to my point about apprenticeships. So you became a chippy or you became a spark, and that's what you did. Or you went down the coal mines or in the steel mills. But the country's changed. You know, a lot of the industry is not there anymore to do that. But I think the expectations of not just moving between jobs of what people want on a daily basis is different. My industry, and this is not a right or wrong point, you know, work a 14-hour day, start at 2 o'clock on Sunday afternoon, dig the snow out from in front of the truck, and off you go for a week and sleep in the cab. That's what my industry what my generation does. Very different to the expectation from your generation. It's not right or wrong, because things have evolved, you know, and it's the right thing to do. I believe your generation doesn't drink as much as my generation. Not that I'm clear on that. But it's just going back to that point from an expectation. What are your expectations of your career at this stage of your generation? What do you want to do? It's a difficult question, but what would a good career look like when you get to 50 and retire, or whatever you do?
I think personally, you know, from my perspective, as I mentioned earlier, you know, I started in the parts, moved to the service advisor, now I'm in sales. The sales was the ultimate goal for me. And I think, you know, where I started was a good sort of backing to get to where I am now. And I think ultimately I've got a certain amount of goals that I've set, you know, get to a sales manager, hopefully then move on to, you know, managing director or upwards from there. And I think with the industry, as long as you're willing, you're motivated, and you've got the hard work, and you prove to your employer that, you know, your willingness and motivated, I think, you know, there's no limit to where you can go. And I think, you know, as I say, my aspirations are to, you know, get to a point, maybe, you know, when I'm 50 or hopefully a bit sooner, you know, but I think I would like to reach that sort of managing director, you know, type role, most definitely.
And I mean, I think I always say this, and I'm sure there'll be some people listening to the podcast that agree. What you just said is a really important point from my perspective. You know, is that, and I'm an example of it. 80% is determination, 20% is ability. You know, I think certainly this is a generational thing. Certainly from mine, it's about desire and about wanting to push on, and it's about always looking to achieve more. So no, it's refreshing to hear, Seb. Stephen, what about you? Same question. What does good look like when you retire at 50?
When I retire at 50, I mean, if I retire at 50, that will be good, wouldn't it? I think for me, I've always tried to set myself out of goals, because I think dreams without goals are just dreams. You've got to have something that you're aspiring to and that you're trying to move towards. I will run a company. I will do that. I will run a company. It will either be my own or it will be somebody else's, because I'm ambitious and I'm driven, and I know that I know in myself I can add value. So I've always had that as the end goal. That's what I want to achieve. But the little goals I set before, right at the very beginning, was to learn as much as I possibly could from everybody else. And I think having those tangible goals that you can go after and try and achieve help you understand what's the career pathway you need to go on to achieve those bigger numbers and everything else. And that's how I originally started setting them. Then they became more ambitions around who can I learn from and what direction do I need them to support me in traveling with. So whether that's outside mentoring, whether that's internal people supporting the journey. And I've had some fantastic people along the way. I know people don't always have the added value and the benefit of that, but what I have always tried to do is ensure that I have those people around me, because like Richard says, 80% is not what you know, it's who you know and what they know and how they can support you on that journey. So yeah, it's just about always tapping into the 80% and then reinforcing the 20% with learning as much as I need to learn to make sure that I have the relevance and value for that role that I'm going into.
Okay, we're gonna. There's a question on my list to talk around driver retention, but it's not really relevant to this conversation. We've done one on that previously, you know, because I do think, but it's a nice segue into my next point. It's important, obviously, drivers are important because we don't go into our drivers, but so to our planners, so to our transport managers, so to people that provide support on the vehicles for the industry. It's quite good. Or make organisations run that support the industry. It's all integrated. I do think sometimes we got a bit lost on the fact it's all about the driver. It's not all about the driver. You know, I don't mean that in a critical way whatsoever. So we're going to talk about, and you've touched upon it, technology and decarbonisation, because the industry is currently facing 3 or 4 major structural changes that it's never done before. Certainly in my experience of 40 years nearly working in it, where you've got the skill shortage everybody talks about. But in this industry, we default to drivers. It's not actually, there's a skill shortage across the piece. I'm experienced it running a trade association. You know, you've got the future fuels, which we'll call the decarbonisation. Is it electric? Is it hydrogen? We're going to stay with diesel. Is it something different? Is it biofuel? Blah, 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 all the way through. You know, you've got what I call the trading position, the economy and the fact that, you know, where we are with the EU, where the global trading is and the price and the costs that are driving up in this sector. And then You know, you've got alongside that as well the intergenerational change away people's expectations from life and from work, which is driving, I think, all of the above, because everybody expects Amazon man or woman to turn up at the doorstep and give them what they want. You know, and that was a massive change. So, from your perspective, and we'll go with Stephen first because you're older. I think I'm allowed to say that. Technology. You know, everyone talks about AI. You know, although AI was around when I started in this industry, kind of. You know, on this info, you know, I got excited on an Excel spreadsheet. That used to be a way of counting numbers, so very different these days. Stephen, from your perspective, how is technology changing, and you know, what do you see decarbonisation looking like in this industry going forward? Two questions there, separate.
Yeah, so in terms of the technology side of things, it is accelerating, and it is accelerating at a rate. But as you say, you know, automation, AI has been around for a very long time, but what you've got now is where AI is becoming more of an intelligence. And I think that's where it can do more of we talk about the proactive against the reactive side of things. I think AI has been really good and previously for, as you say, helping you with the spreadsheets, making tasks simpler, easier, quicker, and more efficient. But what it will do now is start to verge more into the proactive side of things. So the telling you when you're going to have a problem with your operation before you even can see the warning signs. I think when it really is adopted and it is integrated and everything, it will become real fundamental to the industry. So that skill set, going back to the skills challenge and side of things, is going to be a valuable one to have within the industry. So people are thinking about coming into it and they come from a tech background. Then AI is a great one to learn. There's loads of stuff you can do free. There's loads of stuff you can do through proper courses as well. So going down that route of learning the technologies available and what's coming down the line will be really, really important to the next generation. In terms of the adoption of technology, it's in the industry. It's a hodgepodge really. You've got a lot of early adopters, and that's not just your big operators, that's your smaller ones as well. But the bigger ones have the bigger budgets to be able to invest in those areas, so that plays a big role in it. But like our role as in my role and everything, it's about ensuring that for the industry we're able to put the right technology in front of, or technology partners in front of people, so that they can have those conversations now to plan for the future. So technology is going to play a massive role. It'll be a great skill to adopt into. IT back in the day was all about, you know, turn it off, back on again, keep the lights on, make sure the things do what they need to do so everybody gets paid and all of that side of things, where it's actually, IT is becoming more of a fundamental now. It's a hub. It's a bit like your finance operation. It's a bit like your sales function. They sit in the middle and they feed out to everybody. IT is becoming that sort of nucleus, that middle piece to be able to feed out.
That's fine, thank you. This is a random question, but there's a person. Will you get on a plane without a pilot? In your generation, would
I get on a plane without a pilot? That is a very good question, and the answer is no.
Okay.
And I think I wouldn't get in a car without a driver. You know, you see these Waymos, I think it is, you know, driving around America and things. And I don't think I'd actually get them when you see them. You know, I don't think it's there yet. I think potentially in the future, far future maybe, but I think it was an interesting question. But
maybe he's asking his sister who's still at school, because she's that next generation. She might get on that plane. I can download it. You know, it's your thing. Same question to you, Seb. So particularly from a vehicle perspective, and maybe because of you know what I do. So from a technology perspective, because I'll tell you, this is a true story. So about a year ago, I was with Richie Sunak up at members up in his constituency, and he'd never been in a truck, so he got into a truck, and it was really good. And I said to him, "What's the one thing that's not here that you're expecting, Richie?" And the answer was a gear stick, because obviously his perception was, you know, and it was a Scania actually, and it was a very state-of-the-art Scania. It's a nice truck, a tipper. So from a technology perspective, and you can go to decarbonisation if you want. How do you see, and you'll have seen it even in your 3-4 years in the industry, you know, how quickly technology changes? You mentioned telematics, you mentioned, you know, how do you see technology really driving this industry forward from your perspective?
I think it's massive. You know, from when I started with, you know, working for the family business almost 2.5 years ago now, looking at the vehicles now, you know, they've got the driver fatigue detection, you know, lane assist, adaptive cruise control. I mean, the things that are packed into it now, I mean, they've come so far in only, you know, 2 years. And to think, you know, in the next 10 years how it will be is really interesting. And the fact that electric vehicles, yeah, they've been around for a short while. There's a few that have come out, and I think they're getting a lot better. The ranges are getting longer, and I think the charging is getting quicker. And I think it's interesting, but in terms of, you mentioned AI. I mean, it's massive, and I think a lot of businesses are adopting it. Ourselves at All Ports, we're dabbling with it and using it in different sections of what we can. But I think for the transport industry, in terms of their planning and the routing, I think it's massive for them as well. It takes a big job off them.
It was quite interesting. I was at the Defence School of Transport last week, actually, in Leconfield. And it was, they put us in front of these virtual machines on how they can move autonomous vehicles around, and drones and all the other pieces. And it goes back to a bit of the generational piece. There was a number of us from different generations there, some in their 50s, some in 40s, 30s. And the person before that we went on to actually sit on any of these machines said that certain people at certain ages, because they're so used to having operated a vehicle in such a way, they go into sensory overload with all these different gadgets, gizmos, alerting systems, everything around, and they can't handle it, and it actually makes them physically unwell. So that was their disclaimer, telling us to get to a fire exit if you started feeling that way and everything else. And someone actually got on it, and within about a minute was literally, I had to get off the device, had to go out and get fresh air. It was one of the older generations. But it was just such an interesting concept to think of, with when you go back to the vehicles, as you were saying, with all these different support tools, because that's what ultimately technology is there to do. It's there to support, not replace. It's there to enhance. It's now asking a driver to operate in a completely different way, where you've got screens everywhere. You've no longer got the mirrors. You've got cameras. You've got beeps for, especially when you're going into different zones. And it's absolutely fascinating, even for me as a young person sitting in a cab with all that technology on. It is just sensory overload, and we ultimately come back to that point. You want people to be focused on the road. So I think there's a real balance, between utilizing the technology in the way that it's intended, and that's to be more of a safe tool and support with that proactive piece, but also remembering that it's a skill and a profession, and the drivers of these vehicles are qualified. And it is not something you can just jump into and drive off the forecourt and make a career out of it. It's something you need to learn and drive.
Which is good. So we're getting towards the end now, and again, but we've naturally defaulted into that conversation by going back to drivers, which is not a thing, because everybody always just thinks about this industry and it's about that image of the industry. I've never driven a truck in my life. I ain't got a class 1. Oh, that's the question recently, and somebody said, do you think that stops you doing your job? No. Some people might, but I don't, because I've worked with a lot of drivers. It goes back to your point, I think. So being able to connect and talk to people is the most important thing, and to understand from giving you context. Many years ago, when I used to run operations, not many years ago, the best decisions were making the smoking up, when you could go and have cigarettes and talk to the drivers, because they always tell you what's going to happen before it happened, because they were down the road, for example, And as long as you can balance that, but you learn experience from that. I've got 2 more questions before I wrap up. It's been a really interesting conversation. What do you look for from an employer, Seb?
I think it's an interesting question. What do I look for from an employer? I think when you first join a company, and if the employer sees you're willing to learn, you're motivated, I think they need to put you in the deep end. Personally, I think that's how it worked for me. When I was a service advisor, I was put out there, customers were coming at me, and you deal with it. You ask for help, which, as you mentioned earlier, sometimes you feel a bit awkward asking for help when you're new to a company and you're new to a job role. But as you say, people want to teach, you need to learn. And I think employers, such as when I was working for Stellantis and you, they were great. They taught me what I need to learn. They're always there when I needed a bit of support, as well as at All Ports. When I first started there, I had all the support I needed. And I think employers could do a little bit more in terms of trusting the new employee and throwing them a bit into the deep end, and giving a bit of pressure, because I think it does help. I think it does help massively.
That's a good point. Stephen, same question for you.
Direction. I think it's direction of travel. The first thing I look for in an employer is, do they have a plan? Do they have ambition? And then also going back to the original points that I made, is what can I take out of the role? And what is the the path, is there a pathway for me? Is this a role just for the next 2 years? Is it the next 3 years? Or is there actually other ways I can pivot into growing my career to that ultimate goal of that what I'm trying to achieve? So having a plan, seeing a direction of travel, and then rooted in value. I think it's really important that there's, whatever they are, that companies have core values that that everybody is either trying to adopt or adopts, and you basically recruit off the back of that. I think you can very easily recruit somebody that's competent for a role on a CV. They come into an organization and they could be the most disruptive person within that team because they aren't running to the same values as everybody else. So yeah, I'd say direction of travel, clear plan, good values.
That's quite interesting, because they are slightly different answers, which is slightly different generation, you see. So, it's interesting, those answers. When it's played back, you listen to it on the podcast, you'll probably pick up on that. I'm not going to tell you my interpretation of the difference in the answers. So last question, and it's very straightforward on this one. One piece of advice to give to somebody considering entering this industry, Seb?
I think ultimately a piece of advice that I got given at my apprenticeship graduation on Thursday was own your future. And I think it's a very powerful statement. I think, the future's yours. The world's your oyster. If you've got the determination and motivation, you can, there's no limit to where you're going to go. And I'll refer back to it again, own your future.
I mean, the advice I was given, and this was from a very famous entrepreneur at the time, it was he who dares wins. Could have been she as well. Stephen, same question for you.
Bit of advice. The greatest advice is we have a wealth of knowledge within this industry, and there's a wealth of opportunity. So attach yourself to the right mentors, and don't let the how would you call it? Don't let the perception of the industry stop you from at least experiencing it or trying to explore what those opportunities are, because it comes with a stigma, and like we've all talked about, it's linked to, everybody goes back to the driver and everything else, but there is so much opportunity, so explore it.
That's good. Stephen, Seb, thank you very much. 3 generations sat on this podcast, but I think there's one message that's coming through, hopefully resoundingly clear, that it's a great industry to work in. It's got different challenges, it's got different opportunities, and, as Seb said, own your future, or he who dares wins. Thank you very much.